Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
And good Sunday morning to you. Welcome to Capitol View. I'm Jay Burr. California's Fair Pay to Play Act could mean a major shift in the landscape of college athletics. And while other states are considering similar legislation, the NCAA is expected to stand its ground against letting student athletes make money off their name and image.
So, you ready? With star athletes looking on, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed into effect the Fair Pay to Play Act, a law that, effective 2023, will allow college athletes in the Golden State to be able to profit on their name, image, and likeness without repercussions regarding their eligibility or scholarships. California is spearheading the campaign to end what some past college athletes have called the unfair practices of the NCAA. Monetize on players, while players cannot monetize on themselves.
Someone needs to force this dictatorship to change, because that's exactly what it is.
New York, Maryland, Washington State, South Carolina, Colorado, and Florida are now getting in on similar legislation, while other lawmakers are calling for changes to federal laws to create a similar effect nationwide. But while states look to take amateur pay into their own hands, the NCAA is firing back at these efforts, in one case suggesting California not be allowed to host national championships and schools there be prohibited from participating in championships. The NCAA has assembled a working group of administrators nationwide to examine ways which the governing body could evolve rules around athlete compensation.
And meantime, Ohio Congressman Anthony Gonzalez, a former college football standout, says he will propose a national law that would give college athletes the opportunity to make endorsement money. And now here to talk about this law, how Arkansas is reacting, kind of the nuts and bolts of thing here, is University of Central Arkansas Athletic Director Brad Teague, Arkansas State President Dr. Chuck Welch. Guys, welcome in here. Let's get into it here. I guess just first and foremost here, good idea, bad idea?
Ooh, that's a tough question. You know, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Very complicated. And I mean, I understand that student athletes see all this revenue coming into college sports.
Right.
But what they don't understand is there are just 20 institutions in this country which turn a surplus.
Right.
So, you know, there's not a lot of extra money at each institution that's there to pay these players.
Mm-hmm.
And so California decided, well, let's get other entities to pay the players. And you know, maybe it'll end up being a good thing that they're forcing the NCAA to make a change, and
right.
I think that will happen. You know, the California law was passed, but it will not become in effect until, I think, 2023. So we've got some time to figure out what's going to go on throughout the country. Other states are looking at doing something similar, so it's definitely going to force the hand of the NCAA. And remember, when we say the NCAA, that's all of us. We're all members of the NCAA. So there is a committee of ADs and presidents at the NCAA that will make this decision. It's not Dr. Emmert up there, you know, in a glass house making all these decisions. It's our membership collectively trying to decide what's best for the collective group.
But I guess, Dr. Welch, do you think this is maybe a good idea just to even kickstart the conversations here? Because it's been kind of a contentious topic here for the past couple years now, and like Dr. Teague here said, you know, there's a lot of money changing hands, but is there really that much?
You know, I think definitely it's good to have the conversation, but I think it's important that we have that conversation at the national level.
Yeah.
We can't have 50 different policies, 50 different states, and I think Brad makes a great point about, you know, it's a very different, you can't look at it just through the lens of those few schools that are making millions and millions and millions of dollars off of television contracts. There's one school in Arkansas that is profitable. There are 20 nationally. And so you really have to look at it, how does this impact every college and university in the country, and make sure that we don't have these unintended consequences down the road. You know, something may sound very good on the surface, but like Brad said, it's very complex, it's very complicated, and it's important that we have that in-depth study. It was referenced in the clip just a few minutes ago, Gene Smith leading that team that's going to make those recommendations to the NCAA, but we really have got to look at the entire spectrum here and not just focused on 3 or 4 or this concept that, you know, there's just trillions of dollars floating around and everybody's flowing in cash, and it's an easy thing, because it's not.
And I know, too, a lot of people tend to point towards the NCAA itself, not necessarily maybe the member schools are raking in all this money, whether it be from all the college football playoff contracts and the NCAA Final Four, just to name a couple here. I mean, would it be, I guess, feasible for the NCAA itself to maybe kind of pony up? Or I mean, I know where there's a lot of onion layers here.
Yeah, Jay, so the NCAA, they make 90% of their budget off the college basketball tournament.
Right.
Right, and they make 0 off the college football playoff. That's a separate entity.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so the basketball tournament funds the NCAA. The NCAA then distributes that to the membership. Now, they have their own budget for sure.
Sure.
But majority of the funds come back to the 351 Division I institutions, so they're paying it back to us. We still, again, only have 20 of those 351 who turn a surplus at the end of the year. Arkansas is one, as Dr. Welch said. So it's complicated. You know, there's just not a lot of revenue out there to pay student athletes, and think about how many student athletes there are.
A lot.
There's a lot. So it wouldn't be a lot of money. It would be divided by a lot of young men and women, and that wouldn't make sense. But the California law is saying outside entities, you know, businesses could pay these players. These players could sell jerseys possibly and get some kind of licensing revenue. But remember, that's probably the Heisman Trophy winner and the best basketball player in the country. It's just a handful of folks who could generate any type of revenue like that. What concerns me at our level and small towns around this country is there a car dealer out there that wants to advertise, or any vendor or corporation that wants to advertise on a billboard with one of your student athletes, and I guess they could in California, right? Yeah. So how many of those are out there, and how complicated is that? And your quarterback's there, but your offensive lineman's not. You know, it's just it's a difficult issue.
I think it's critical, I mean, that we focus on this, but we also protect the amateur model. I mean, you know, these student athletes are there to be students first and foremost, and to make sure they graduate. Many of these students are getting their cost of college attendance subsidized, and so it's really important that we don't cross that line over, just like Brad was saying, and that's a tightrope to walk, but I think it's really critically important that at the end of the day, the NCAA considers we are different from the professional leagues, and how can we make sure that we continue to have that, that difference in place.
All right, well, coming up after, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to continue this conversation on how paying college athletes totally change the playing field. You're watching Capitol View Sunday morning.
Hardee's Monster Roast Beef is savory beef covered with applewood smoked bacon covered in melted cheese. That's like doing donuts in a hot rod while catching a game-winning Hail Mary. Hardee's Monster Roast Beef. It's the ultimate triple threat.
Hi, I'm Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin. You know, fall means tailgating and football in Arkansas, and we love it. Football season reminds us that the next generation is on the way. STEM education, lower taxes, and leaner, smarter government are essential to grow good-paying jobs. Jobs that will let Arkansans raise their families right here at home. Stand with Arkansas Competes and demand world-class education, lower taxes, and leaner, smarter government. I'm the monster truck driver. And the crowd goes wild.
Dad, let's go see some real monster trucks.
Come see Amp Motorsports Monster Mash at the Arkansas State Fair Saturday, October 19th, 5 p.m. Barton Coliseum, featuring Bigfoot, Monster Patrol, and King Crunch. Advance tickets just $12 for kids. Available now at ArkansasStateFair.com. Presented by Steve Landers Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram. Don't miss Monster Mash, October 19th at the Arkansas State Fair.
Back by popular demand. When you shop Furniture Row, you pay what we pay. That's right. For a limited time, our employee pricing is available to everyone. Get 15% off a single item with purchases of $9.99 and up. That means you can save big on that perfect sofa, dining table, bed, or Denver Mattress brand mattress.
Our discount is your discount.
Plus, no interest until January 2022. But hurry, employee pricing at Furniture Row ends Thursday the 17th.
Hardee's new 2-3 More menu makes breakfast on the go easy. 2 cinnamon and raisin biscuits or a sausage biscuit, $2. Bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit, $3. Hardy breakfast platter, $4. Because mornings are better on autopilot. Hardee's new 2-3 More menu.
Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back into Capitol View. Continue our conversation here. Brad Teague, Chuck Welch here from University of Central Arkansas, Arkansas State, respectively. Guys, we're talking here into the break. You mentioned the car dealerships, and I know that's kind of one thing that everybody tends to really think about when they think about paying players, but there's lots of other corporations. In your opinion, I guess, would there be a way to regulate that? Because it already kind of seems like that could get a little shady or it could get shady real quickly. Would there be something that you would especially feel comfortable with limiting or
that's
something?
the unknown right now, Jay. The California law doesn't set any limits,
right?
And that's the concern. You know, so globally, you think, well, if California can do it, they can therefore probably recruit a student that we cannot, because we, you know, they potentially could make a lot more revenue in California than they could in any other state, and that's the biggest concern the NCAA has right now, and that's why they're threatening, you know, we will not let you host championships.
Yeah.
You've heard other ADs around the country at major universities say they will not play anyone from California if this continues. But again, I think over the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see some change nationally with our association, the NCAA, to try to regulate exactly what you're saying. I mean, how can you ensure that it's fair for all?
Right. And also, too, just the recruiting aspect of things. You know, some states are going to have this, some states may not, depending on how they do on the national level. How would that change the game? The fact that you could go into a kid's room and be like, hey, you can make some extra money.
Significant. I mean, think about you growing up out of high school, which college you wanted to attend. If one would give you a full scholarship and the other would give you a full scholarship plus lots of spending money, you know.
And most institutions are already at a disadvantage, and so this just further complicates that for those that don't have those resources and aren't able to offer some of those things. It just makes that even worse and really continues to widen that gap. And that's something I think that the NCAA's got to continue to look at to ensure some sort of parity and equality across the spectrum.
And there's already a stipend in there for student athletes, I know, at a lot of institutions. What would change beyond that, theoretically? I mean, obviously the outside sources of income would be the big change, but from an institutional standpoint, what would change with that? Or would that be tacked on, or how would that work?
Yeah, we would not see any change from institutional funds. You know, you would still have, let's say you're a football player or a basketball player, you receive a full scholarship plus your cost of attendance for your institution. And at UCA, we do that for both men's and women's basketball. At Arkansas State, they have football and other sports that they provide this cost of attendance, and it's essentially another $500 a month already. And that change happened 3 or 4 years ago. Now, this is something outside of institutional funding. This is coming from outside entities, again, from businesses. So that's what's difficult. I mean, it's going to be all over the map. It's going to be anything from a few dollars to maybe several $1,000s. So we'll see.
And I think it's also important to remember the NCAA has a name, image, likeness waiver process right now. And I think our athletic director told me 98% of those were approved last year. So there's already a process in place, and I think it's important that we continue to be able to have some of those controls to prevent it from just being sort of the wild, wild west and all over the map. And I think everybody needs to take a deep breath. I think it could be a very positive discussion long term. We just need to make sure that we're very methodical in the way that we work this out and try to anticipate as many unintended consequences as possible.
Now, I know a lot of this is being focused on the football aspect of things, but when you get into Title IX, some of those things, having to have that equality, I mean, it seems like that's not really a thing that's been thrown out there, or at least I haven't seen a whole lot of discussion myself. But where does sort of some of that come into play, or really does it? Because we're talking about outside entities, but you still have to be able to provide those opportunities.
Yeah, excellent question, Jay. Who knows? And you would think that most businesses would want a football player, a men's basketball player, simply because they're on TV. Right? They're known. Their name, image, and likeness is well known. So that's not fair. That is not fair. However, it is not institutional dollars that's, you know, breaking any Title IX rules. It's outside entities, so I'm not sure the federal government would look upon the institution and say, you know, hey, you're breaking our Title IX rules, so we're going to withhold federal funds from your institution. I don't think that would happen.
Well, we saw a similar issue with the national women's soccer team and some of the comparisons there, and we certainly don't want to get into that at the NCAA level. So I think, again, that's another one of those, there's so many issues, and Brad started this whole conversation off with how complex this is. And I think that's the thing. We need to be looking at this nationally. We need to make sure that we've considered all these aspects and that we don't wake up 2 or 3 years from now and realize we've created an even more significant problem for our institutions and for our student athletes.
Because I would imagine it's a lot harder to dial back once you've kind of stepped in further into it.
Absolutely.
You mentioned something, Dr. Welch. I want to kind of expound on a little bit is the waiver that's already in place. What exactly is that? How does it work?
I may have to let Brad speak to that a little bit, but I know that there are instances where student athletes, I know there was a women's soccer player that wrote a children's book, and so she asked to have a waiver to be able to earn revenue and things off of that. Right. But it's when there are those instances that they feel like it's appropriate for it to happen, they can seek that waiver through the NCAA and get that revenue from that otherwise would be deemed inappropriate. Brad, you want to add on to that? You probably know more about it.
So there's not many instances like he's speaking about, and there's not a lot of student athletes writing books, but you also have social media these days.
And I know the kicker from UCF with the YouTube channel.
That was a national story. It's those kind of things. He was denied and then it was accepted. So I think the NCAA is starting to understand, these opportunities that are unique to these individuals, and like Dr. Welch said, they are pretty much granting most of those requests.
Now, I mean, what does it take to get that thing denied? Because obviously you'd think that there's probably going to be a denial just right off the bat, just so they can kind of cross the T's and dot the I's. But really, how do you get denied? If they're denying or they're accepting 98% of them, I mean, really, what's that criteria?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the NCAA is good at denying things. That's kind of the first response. Yeah. And then they say, well, go to our appeals committee, and then they're a little more favorable. And so that happens a lot. So what would it take? I mean, if it's some kind of business that looks sketchy, I mean, it would have to be really shady kind of situation. So otherwise, if it's above board, pretty much it's approved.
Do we know if Arkansas is sort of kicking the can on this? Any of you guys have heard anything on that?
I have not.
I have not, no.
All right. Well, it's definitely an interesting conversation. Guys, we certainly do appreciate the expertise because this is a pretty complex issue, and we certainly thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right. When we come back, we'll take a look at your top headlines and update you on a vote at the Capitol, the first of its kind in decades. You're watching Capitol View Sunday morning.
For the first time ever, get 75 months no-interest financing at FFO Home. This limited-time offer is an amazing opportunity to get your new living room, bedroom, or dining group. Details in stores. Save now at FFO Home.
Hi, I'm Missy Gibson. My family and I would like to invite you to see all that John Gibson Auto Sales has to offer. We have one of the largest, most diverse, and newest inventory of any buy here, pay here dealers in the state. We have cars, trucks, SUVs, motorcycles, ATVs, campers, performance trailers, and boats. Whether you have good credit, bad credit, or no credit, we will finance you. Check us out at johngibsonautosales.com, and we will have your purchase ready when you get here.
Sold it.
Attention gun enthusiasts and collectors, live and online rare firearm and luxury furniture absolute auction with 400 estate items, including 86 firearms, a rare 1924 Holland & Holland 577 Nitro Express double rifle, a Jarrett 300, 15 Benelli shotguns, 17 Brownings, Colt pistols, and much more. Online bidding is now open through the Wilson Bidding app with a live auction Tuesday, October 22nd at 5 p.m. from 145 Blackhawk Lane in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And everything is seller regardless of price. Go to wilsonauctioneers.com.
Sold it.
My feet hurt so bad in the morning, I couldn't even put my feet on the floor. So I had to start engineering my own arch support. So I got that, then I put this in there, this one. Finally, before I added another one of these in, I went to Good Feet, and they gave me this. So I built all this together to engineer a solution to my pain. And if I'd have just gone to Good Feet, I'd have been better off in the first place.
Good Feet Arch Supports, engineered for pain relief, personally fitted for you.
We like our heroes to be larger than life. But in the real world, heroes don't hide behind capes or masks, and they change lives not with daring actions, but with small gestures. On our 10th anniversary, we celebrate everyone who has played the Arkansas Scholarship Lottery. You've created nearly $1 billion in scholarships to educate the next generation of Arkansans. So while you didn't set out to be heroic, you certainly achieved it. Because when you play, we all win.
For the first time ever, get 75 months no-interest financing at FFO Home. This limited-time offer is an amazing opportunity to get your new living room, bedroom, or dining group. Details in stores. Save now at FFO Home.
Watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back to Capitol View. Out on the campaign trail, Elizabeth Warren says she'll forego high-dollar fundraising events if she's the Democratic nominee for president. Warren has made that pledge throughout the primaries, but now says her small donor focus would stay intact during the general election. She told reporters avoiding private fundraisers with wealthy donors and not targeting supporters who can contribute the maximum limit has been a success so far. Warren pushed back on fears the policy would put the Democratic Party at a financial disadvantage in the general election.
So, look, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and that is funding my campaign in the primary and in the general through small dollar donations. I think this is critically important to building a grassroots movement and to rebuilding our democracy. At the same time, I'm not asking our state parties or our national party to unilaterally disarm. I'm going to help them raise money.
Warren spoke after discussing environmental justice while touring a predominantly African-American neighborhood in Charleston. During the tour, she asked the residents about noise pollution and air quality in the area. Joe Biden is calling for President Trump to be impeached. Biden did so as he tossed aside his stump speech in New Hampshire. The Democratic presidential candidate claimed Mr. Trump has openly invited impeachment through his own words, including public calls for other nations to investigate his political opponents. Biden pushed back against what he calls, quote, lies and smears by the president against his own family.
He believes he can and will get away with anything he does. We all laughed when he said he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and get away with it. It's no joke. He's shooting holes in the Constitution, and we cannot let him get away with it.
President Trump tweeted during Biden's remarks, calling Biden's impeachment call, quote, pathetic and a sign of a failing campaign. A new poll from NBC News and the Wall Street Journal shows a combined 55% of Americans say there's enough evidence to either impeach the president and remove him from office or begin an impeachment inquiry. Only 39% say there isn't enough evidence for Congress to hold an impeachment inquiry. 47% say the allegations that he requested Ukraine to look into Joe Biden and his son are, quote, quite serious or extremely serious, including 21% of Republicans. 28% say no merit, 25% are unsure or have no opinion, and only 38% agree the president has been honest and truthful regarding his actions. The president's overall approval numbers stand at 43%, with a 53% disapproval. House Democrats have introduced a proposal that they think will fix what they call a broken political system. The act would require states to adopt ranked choice voting in primary and general elections for Congress beginning in 2022. Washington correspondent Morgan Wright reports the Conservative Heritage Foundation says the plan is a scheme to disconnect elections from issues and allow candidates with marginal support from voters to win.
A group of House Democrats wants to change the way the American public casts their votes at the ballot box.
Our politics is broken in different ways.
Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin says ranked choice voting, which allows voters to rank multiple candidates in order of preference, could be a solution.
You would rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If somebody got a majority, if somebody got 53% of the vote, then they would just win. But if nobody did, you would drop off the 5th place person and redistribute their votes.
Raskin says too many politicians are getting elected to office without a majority of the vote.
Our legislation would just require that congressional elections across the country in both the primaries and the general elections use the ranked choice voting method.
Ranked choice voting is already used in more than a dozen cities and towns around the country and the state of Maine. But some say the concept simply just won't work nationally.
It's not going to fix anything. In fact, it'll make things worse.
Hans von Spakowski with the Heritage Foundation says the concept has many problems, like voter confusion and disenfranchisement.
We've had the same system of voting now for a long time. And I think anybody who wants to change it has to make a very strong case that it's a better system, and I don't think they can do that.
Raskin introduced the bill last month, but it's unclear if it will advance further. Reporting in Washington, Morgan Wright.
On Thursday, the State Board of Education made some key votes concerning the Little Rock School District. The board voted to no longer allow the Little Rock Education Association to have negotiating powers with the commissioner when it comes to teacher contracts. The partnership with the union ends October 31st. The State Board Chair, Diane Zook, reacts to that decision.
There are some LREA members who will not be happy. There are some LREA members who have contacted us who are perfectly happy to have a PPC. Those teachers that are not a member of LREA, who have not had a seat at the table, they may be happy or they may not want a seat.
Another vote after being under state control for 5 years for academics distress. State board members voted to put the Little Rock School District on a pathway back to local control. And at this point, there's no specific plan for what local control will look like. The board also voted to reinstate the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act. Last year, the board voted to waive that act. When we come back, we'll update you on the vote to expel State Representative Mickey Gates. Back to wrap it up. After this, you're watching Capitol View Sunday morning.
This Junior Garlic Butter Burger is so juicy. The butter really brings out the flavor.
Well said, Peter.
You're kind of buttering me up. What did you do?
You're just a really good friend.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Grab a $2.99 Junior Garlic Butter Bacon Burger with tots while they last.
Come and enjoy a new experience in shopping for your home. At Aladdin Rugs and Home Decor, we have over 5,000 rugs in the latest colors and styles. Bring your pillows, your pillow shams, and sizes. We will help you select the perfect rug. We're #1 in customer service with 15,000 square feet of rugs, unique home decor, wallpaper, and flooring. Remember, buy today, take it home today, and save. Why wait?
Watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
A yes vote is for the expulsion of Representative Gates. Prepare the machine, Mr. Clerk.
An overwhelming vote in support of expelling Representative Mickey Gates on Friday as the House voted 88-4 with 7 abstaining. House Speaker Matthew Shepard stuck to the law when presenting his case for expelling Gates, bringing up Arkansas Code and the fact that the House can discipline themselves on matters and the fact that Gates pleaded no contest to felony charges for not paying state income taxes. Gates maintained that he had not been found guilty of those charges.
I am still afforded the right of due process and the right of a presumption of innocence until I am found guilty.
I think if you went out and asked the average Arkansan, do you think you should file your taxes? They'd probably begrudgingly say, yeah, we should. But then if you ask the average Arkansan, do you think that someone who has pled no contest to failing to file those taxes, who is under probation to pay back money to the state of Arkansas, who has had their rights somewhat restricted, who has waived their ability to contest those charges, do you think that person should still be in the General Assembly? I think that most Arkansans would say no.
Last time a member was expelled was back in 1837 when Speaker John Wilson was kicked out for stabbing another member to death on the floor during a debate on wolf scalp legislation. So there's that. We're back with an all-new Capitol View next week. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.